The neon lights of Hong Kong flickered against the humid evening sky as Jackie Chan walked out of the Golden Harvest Studios in 1979. His shoulders ached from a long day to performing dangerous stunts for his latest movie project. At just 25 years old, Chan was slowly making a name for himself in the Hong Kong film industry, though he wasn't yet the international superstar he would later become. The narrow streets were getting dark, and the usual buzz of the neighborhood was different tonight. Local shop owners were closing their shutters earlier than usual, and elderly women hurried past with their shopping bags, avoiding eye contact with anyone. Something felt off, but Chan was too exhausted to pay much attention. A few blocks away, at the Red Dragon Bar, a group of local gang members had been drinking since afternoon. Their leader, a muscular man known as Big Brother Wom, sat at a corner table, his leather jacket decorated with metal studs that caught the dim bar lights. The gang had been growing increasingly frustrated with the film crews that kept invading their territory. "These movie people think they own these streets now," Wong growled, slamming his beer bottle on the wooden table. His 5 companions nodded in agreement, their faces flushed from too much alcohol. They had built their reputation through fear and violence, controlling several blocks of the neighborhood through extortion and threats. The gang members had been watching the film productions with growing anger. Every time a movie crew showed up, the police presence increased, making it harder for them to conduct their usual business. The local shop owners, who usually paid protection money without question, were becoming bolder, thinking the film industry might offer them protection. Through the bar's grimy window, one of the younger gang members spotted Chan walking alone. "Big brother, look who's here," he said, pointing outside. "It's that new action star they're all talking about. The one who does his own stunts." Wong stood up, his chair scraping against the floor. He had heard about Jackie Chan, the rising star who was different from Bruce Lee, mixing comedy with action. To Wong, this was a perfect opportunity to send a message to the film industry. If they could rough up one of their stars, maybe these movie people would think twice before filming in their territory again. The gang watched as Chan stopped at a small noodle cart, buying his dinner. The old vendor, Mr. Liu, had been serving late-night meals in that spot for 20 years. He knew all the local stories and had seen the neighborhood change. As he prepared Chan's noodles, he noticed the gang members watching from the bar. "Young man," Mr. Liu said quietly while handing Chan his food, "perhaps you should eat this at home tonight." His eyes darted toward the bar, but Chan was too tired to notice the warning. He thanked the vendor and continued walking, planning to eat at a nearby park where he often practiced his moves during breaks. Inside the bar, Wong gathered his men. "Time to teach these movie people a lesson," he said, cracking his knuckles. The gang members finished their drinks, their movements now clumsy from alcohol but their minds focused on violence. They had beaten up plenty of people before. This would be different. This would make the news. As they stepped out into the street, the evening had grown darker. The few pedestrians still out quickly crossed to the other side, recognizing the gang members. A stray cat knocked over a trash can, the sound echoing through the alley. The atmosphere was tense, like the moment before a storm breaks. Chan continued walking, lost in thoughts about tomorrow's shooting schedule. He was planning a complicated stunt sequence that would involve jumping between buildings. The noodles in his hand were getting cold, and the streets were unusually quiet. Behind him, 6 shadows moved silently, spreading out to block any escape routes. Mr. Liu watched from his noodle cart as the gang followed Chan. He wanted to shout a warning, but knew better than to interfere with Wong's business. Instead, he began packing up his cart early, not wanting to witness what was about to happen. The old vendor had seen enough violence in his life to know when trouble was coming. What nobody knew at that moment, not the gang members, not Mr. Liu, and not even Jackie Chan himself, was that this evening would become one of the most talked about incidents in Hong Kong's entertainment district. The events that were about to unfold would change not just Chan's relationship with the local gangs, but would become a story that would be told and retold for years to come. The confrontation began in a narrow alley lined with damp cardboard boxes and the day's forgotten newspapers. Jackie Chan had just turned into the shortcut, still holding his cooling noodles, when he heard footsteps behind him. Before he could react, more shadows appeared at the other end of the alley, blocking his path forward. "Hey, movie star," Wong's voice boomed from behind, his words slightly slurred from the evening's drinking. "You're in our neighborhood now." The gang leader stepped into the dim light of a flickering street lamp, his brass knuckles glinting dangerously. His 5 followers spread out in a semicircle, effectively trapping Chan against a graffiti-covered wall. Chan slowly placed his noodle container on a nearby crate, his movements calm and deliberate. He'd been in enough movie fights to recognize when a real one was about to begin. The difference was that now there would be no director yelling cut, no safety mats, and no second takes. Wong's second in command, a skinny man with a dragon tattoo snaking up his neck, spat on the ground. "Your fancy movie people think you can just come here and take over our streets?" he snarled, pulling out a short metal pipe from his jacket. The others produced their own weapons: chains, brass knuckles, and wooden sticks. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. A cat perched on a nearby dumpster watched the scene unfold, its eyes reflecting the street light like tiny mirrors. The distant sound of traffic and the muffled music from nearby bars created an eerie backdrop to the confrontation. "We don't want any trouble," Chan said softly, his eyes scanning each gang member, noting their positions and weapons. His mind was already calculating angles and distances, just as he did before performing complex stunts. "This neighborhood has enough space for everyone." Wong laughed, the sound echoing off the alley walls. "Trouble? Trouble is exactly what you movie people brought to our territory." He stepped closer, his brass knuckles catching the light. "But don't worry, we're just going to give you a little message to take back to your producer friends." Chan noticed that despite their threatening poses, the gang members were swaying slightly, the effects of their drinking session evident in their unsteady stances. Wong himself was blinking more than necessary, trying to focus his vision. In any other situation, this might have been an advantage, but drunk men were often more dangerous because they were unpredictable. "How much?" Chan asked, his voice steady. "How much protection money do you want?" He was buying time, observing how the gang members reacted to each other. He noticed that 2 of them kept looking at Wong before making any move. They were the most loyal ones. The others seemed more hesitant, perhaps new to the gang. Wong's face darkened at the question. "You think everything can be solved with money?" he growled, stepping even closer. The smell of alcohol and cheap cologne filled the air between them. "This is about respect. This is about showing your movie people that you can't just walk into our territory like you own it." The gang started closing in, their circle getting tighter. The metal pipe scraped against the concrete wall, creating a spine-chilling screech. Chains rattled ominously in the darkness. From somewhere nearby, a door slammed shut. Someone had seen what was about to happen and wanted no part of it. Chan's body tensed imperceptibly. Years of training had taught him how to hide his preparations for action. His weight shifted slightly to the balls of his feet, his breathing remained steady, and his hands stayed relaxed at his sides. To the gang members, he probably looked scared and defeated. They had no way of knowing they were about to face someone whose body was as precisely tuned as a finely crafted instrument. "Last chance, movie star," Wong announced, raising his brass-knuckled fist. "Either you pay up and crawl back to your studio with a message, or we make an example out of you." The other gang members moved in closer, their weapons ready. The cat on the dumpster suddenly hissed and jumped away, as if it sensed the violence about to explode in the alley. A single drop of water fell from an air conditioning unit above, landing between Chan and Wong. In that split second before chaos erupted, time seemed to slow down. The next few moments would transform this simple alley into the stage for a story that would be whispered about in every tea house and noodle shop in Hong Kong for years to come. Jackie Chan had learned many lessons throughout his young life in the Hong Kong film industry, but perhaps the most important one was that real fights were nothing like movie fights. As he stood in that dark alley, surrounded by 6 angry gang members, he remembered his old master's words. "The best victory is when no one gets hurt." The young martial artist took a deep breath, his hands still open and visible at his sides. The gang members interpreted his calm demeanor as fear, but they couldn't have been more wrong. Chan was actually counting their breaths, their steps, the slight sway in their movements from the alcohol they consumed. "Listen," Chan said, his voice carrying a gentle authority that made even Wong pause for a moment. "I understand this is your neighborhood. You protect it, you know everyone here, and you've been here longer than us." This unexpected response made the gang members exchange confused glances. They had expected pleading or panic, not this measured response. Wong's grip on his brass knuckles loosened slightly. Then you know why we can't let you people just walk in here like you own the place, he said, though his voice had lost some of its earlier aggression. The other gang members watched this exchange with growing curiosity, their weapons still raised but their stance less threatening. Chan nodded slowly, maintaining eye contact with Wong. The film industry can actually bring good things to this neighborhood, he explained. More customers for the shops, more jobs for young people, better streets because the city will pay more attention here. He gestured to the surrounding buildings, their worn facades visible in the dim light. The gang member with the dragon tattoo snorted. And more cops too, he spat. Making it hard for us to do business. A murmur of agreement rippled through the group, and they began to close in again. Chan raised his hand slightly, not in defense, but as if he were teaching a class. Think bigger, he said. With more business coming in, there are better ways to make money than protection fees. Legal ways. He noticed how Wong's eyes narrowed at these words. He had struck a chord. A few drops of rain began to fall, creating dark spots on the concrete. The noodles Chan had bought sat forgotten on the crate, their steam no longer visible in the cool night air. Somewhere in the distance, police sirens wailed, making everyone in the alley tense up momentarily. You talk smart for a movie guy, Wong said, taking half a step back, but words won't solve this. We need to send a message. Despite his tough talk, Chan could see the gang leader was thinking about what he'd said. The other gang members seemed less certain now, their earlier drunken courage giving way to hesitation. Chan decided to take a risk. He reached slowly into his pocket, making everyone flinch, but pulled out only a small notebook and pen. Let me give you my number, he said, writing carefully. Next week, we're starting a new film. We need extras, stuntmen, security. People who know the neighborhood. He tore out the page and held it out to Wong. The gang leader stared at the piece of paper as if it might bite him. The other gang members watched, weapons lowered slightly, waiting to see what their leader would do. The moment stretched out, filled only with the sound of distant traffic and the gentle patter of increasing rain. Wong finally reached out and took the paper, his brass knuckles now hanging loosely from his other hand. This better not be a trick, he growled, but the threat in his voice had diminished considerably. No tricks? Chan replied. Just business. Better business than fighting in an alley. He gestured at the film studio's direction. Come by tomorrow afternoon. Ask for Jackie Chan. We can talk about how to make this work for everyone. The tension in the alley began to dissolve like sugar in hot tea. One by one, the gang members lowered their weapons completely. Even the man with the dragon tattoo slipped his metal pipe back into his jacket, though he tried to maintain his scowl. Wong looked at the paper one more time, then folded it carefully and put it in his pocket. We'll think about it, he said, trying to maintain his tough image. But don't think this means we're friends, movie star. Chan picked up his cold noodles from the crate and smiled slightly. Not friends, he agreed. Just neighbors. For now. The rain was falling steadily now, washing away the evening's tension. As the gang began to back away, Chan knew that while this particular crisis had been averted, the real challenge would begin tomorrow. Sometimes the hardest fights were the ones you won without throwing a single punch. Just when it seemed the tension had dissolved, everything changed in an instant. A police car's siren wailed nearby, much closer this time, and panic erupted in the alley. Wong's face suddenly hardened. He couldn't be seen backing down in front of his gang. The peaceful moment shattered like glass on concrete. Get him! Wong shouted, his earlier hesitation replaced by desperate bravado. 3 of his men launched forward without warning, their weapons raised. The first swung his chain in a wide arc, aiming for Chan's head. The second lunged with his metal pipe, targeting Chan's midsection. The third, the man with the dragon tattoo, tried to circle behind. Chan's body reacted before his mind could process the change. Years of training took over as he dropped his noodle container and moved with fluid grace. The chain whistled through empty air where his head had been just a split second before. The metal pipe struck nothing but raindrops. The dragon-tattooed man found himself grabbing at shadows. Stop, Chan called out, ducking another wild swing. We don't need to do this. But his words were lost in the chaos. The confined space of the alley, which moments ago had held the promise of peace, now became a dangerous arena. The rain made the ground slippery, and the poor lighting cast confusing shadows that made every movement treacherous. Wong stood back, his brass knuckles glinting as lightning flashed overhead. He watched as his men attempted to corner the martial artist, their drunken confidence making their attacks sloppy and predictable. The remaining two gang members hung back, uncertain whether to join the fray. The man with the chain swung again, but the weapon's momentum carried him off balance. Chan sidestepped smoothly, letting the chain wrap harmlessly around a nearby pipe. The attacker tugged frantically, but his weapon was temporarily tangled. In his desperate attempts to free it, he nearly struck one of his own companions. The metal pipe came whistling through the air again, wielded by an increasingly frustrated gang member. Chan moved like water, flowing around the attacks rather than meeting them head-on. His movements were economical, using only what was necessary to avoid injury. He hadn't thrown a single punch yet, which only served to enrage his attackers further. "Stand still." The dragon-tattooed man screamed in frustration, his boots splashing in the growing puddles. He lunged forward, overextending himself in his eagerness to land a blow. Chan simply wasn't where the attacks were aimed, moving with a grace that made the gang members look like they were fighting in slow motion. The confined space of the alley began working against the attackers. In their frenzy to hit Chan, they kept getting in each other's way. The chain wielder finally freed his weapon, only to accidentally strike the pipe holder in the shoulder. Curses filled the air, mixing with the sound of rain and heavy breathing. Wong watched with growing concern as his men flailed ineffectively. What had started as a simple intimidation had turned into an embarrassing display of his gang's incompetence. The two men who hadn't joined the attack began backing away, sensing that this situation was spiraling out of control. The dragon-tattooed man, growing desperate, pulled a small knife from his boot, breaking the unspoken rule of their original plan to just rough up the movie star. The blade gleamed dangerously in the dim light, raising the stakes of the confrontation to a deadly level. "He's got a knife," one of the backing gang members shouted, more out of shock than warning. Even Wong looked alarmed. This wasn't supposed to go this far. But in the chaos of the moment, nobody could stop what was about to happen. Time seemed to slow down as the knife wielder charged forward, blade extended. Rain fell in sheets now, making every surface treacherous. Chan's eyes narrowed, his expression changing for the first time since the attack began. The introduction of the knife had changed everything. This was no longer about avoiding conflict, but about preventing serious injury. Lightning flashed again, illuminating the scene like a macabre photograph, the knife wielder lunging forward, the other attackers frozen in various positions of assault. Wong's face showing the first signs of real worry, and Chan's stance shifting subtly from pure defense to something else entirely. In that frozen moment, everyone in the alley suddenly realized that they had made a terrible mistake. They hadn't attacked a simple movie star, they had cornered a martial arts master who had been holding back. As thunder rolled overhead, the real fight was about to begin, and nothing would unfold as the gang had planned. The knife sliced through the rain-filled air, but Chan moved like quicksilver. In one fluid motion, he stepped inside the attack, his hand grasping the attacker's wrist with precision born from years of training. The dragon-tattooed man's momentum carried him forward, but instead of resisting, Chan guided that energy in a graceful arc. Before anyone could blink, the knife wielder found himself airborne. His own forward motion, combined with Chan's subtle redirection, sent him flying into a stack of empty cardboard boxes. The knife clattered harmlessly to the ground, sliding into a drain grate where it disappeared with a metallic ping. "Watch this," shouted the chain wielder, thinking he had found an opening. He swung his weapon in a wide circle, creating a whistling sound that cut through the rainfall. Chan's response left everyone slack-jawed. He stepped forward instead of back, moving so close that the chain couldn't gain momentum. With a twist of his body, he caught the chain's end and used it like a dance partner might lead in a tango. The gang member, still holding the other end of the chain, suddenly found himself being pulled forward. His feet slipped on the wet ground, and he stumbled directly into the path of his companion with the metal pipe. Both men collided with a grunt, sprawling into a puddle that reflected the neon lights from the street beyond. Wong watched in disbelief as his feared gang members were being dismantled without Chan throwing a single aggressive punch. The martial artists moved with a fluidity that made their attacks look clumsy and amateur. It was like watching a master chef handle kitchen knives. Every movement had purpose, nothing was wasted. The remaining attackers hesitated, their earlier drunken courage completely evaporated. They had expected to fight a movie star, but instead found themselves facing something entirely different. Chan's movements weren't the flashy kicks and punches they'd seen in films. This was real martial arts, efficient and beautiful in its simplicity. One of the gang members tried a desperate rush, hoping to tackle Chan to the ground. Chan sidestepped at the last moment, his hand lightly touching the attacker's back. That slight touch was enough to guide the rushing man straight into a pile of garbage bags. The man emerged, sputtering and covered in coffee grounds and vegetable peelings. "Stop." Chan called out again, his voice calm despite the chaos. "Look at what you're doing to each other." He gestured at the scene around them. One man tangled in boxes, two sprawled in a puddle, another wearing yesterday's garbage, and the dragon-tattooed man still trying to shake off his dizziness. The rain continued to fall, but now it felt like it was washing away more than just the day's heat. It was washing away the gang's illusions about their own toughness, about their ability to intimidate anyone they chose. Wang stood rooted to his spot, his brass knuckles now hanging uselessly at his side. Chan took advantage of the moment to demonstrate something unexpected. He began moving through the alley, helping each fallen gang member to their feet. To their surprise, his touch was gentle, his concern genuine as he checked for injuries. Even the dragon-tattooed man, who had pulled the knife, received a helping hand and a kind word. This is the difference between movie fighting and real martial arts, Chan explained as he helped the last man up. It's not about hurting people. It's about protecting yourself and others, about turning bad energy into something harmless. He gestured at their weapons scattered across the alley. Those aren't strength. Real strength is here and here. He pointed to his head and heart. The gang members gathered together, but this time not to attack. They stood in a loose circle, soaking wet, some nursing bruises, all wearing expressions of confusion and newfound respect. The rain began to ease, as if nature itself was calling an end to the confrontation. Wang stepped forward, his face a mixture of emotions. He looked at his men, feared street fighters who had just been schooled like children, and then at Chan, who stood relaxed and ready, but without any hint of superiority or mockery. The gang leader reached into his pocket, pulled out the piece of paper with Chan's number, and looked at it with new eyes. The next few moments would determine whether this night would end in renewed violence or something entirely unexpected. The air was thick with possibility, and everyone in that alley knew they were part of a turning point that would be remembered for years to come. Wang looked at the soggy paper in his hand, then at his battered gang members, and finally at Chan, who stood calmly in the rain. A strange sound started to build in Wang's chest. At first, it sounded like anger, but then it burst forth as something entirely unexpected: laughter. Deep, genuine laughter that echoed off the alley walls. "All these years on these streets," Wang said between laughs, "and I've never seen anything like this." He gestured at his men, some still picking garbage from their clothes, others wringing water from their jackets. "We came to teach you a lesson, but instead," he shook his head, unable to finish the sentence. The dragon-tattooed man, now nursing a bruised ego more than any physical injuries, spoke up. "How did you do that?" "With the knife? I was sure I had you." His voice carried no anger now, only genuine curiosity. He had trained in street fighting for years, but what he just experienced was something entirely different. Chan smiled and walked over to a dry spot under a small awning. "Let me show you," he said, motioning for the man to join him. The other gang members gathered around, their weapons forgotten in various puddles. Even the two who had stayed out of the fight drew closer, intrigued. "In movies, we make everything look big and dramatic," Chan explained, demonstrating an exaggerated kung fu pose that made several gang members chuckle. "But real martial arts is about small movements, about using your attacker's energy against them." He showed them the simple wrist lock he had used, moving in slow motion. The gang members watched, fascinated, as Chan broke down the techniques he had used against them. He showed how the chain wielder had defeated himself with his own weapon's momentum, how the rushing tackle had been redirected with minimal effort, and how even the knife attack had been turned into a harmless tumble. "Try it," Chan encouraged, setting up a simple exercise with Wang's permission. The gang members paired up, practicing the basic movement he had shown them. Their attempts were clumsy at first, but Chan patiently corrected their stances and explained the principles behind each move. Soon, the alley that had been a battleground transformed into an impromptu martial arts class. The sound of combat was replaced by questions, laughter, and the occasional, "Oh, now I get it." The rain had stopped completely, and steam rose from the warm ground, creating an almost mystical atmosphere. Wang watched his men learning, a thoughtful expression on his face. "You were serious about those jobs at the studio?" he asked Chan quietly. "My guys, they're not bad people. Just never had many options." His voice carried the weight of someone who had seen too many young lives wasted on the streets. Chan nodded. "Every film needs people who know the streets, who understand how real fights work." He gestured at the gang members still practicing. "They have natural talent. With training, they could be excellent stuntmen or security personnel. Legal work with steady pay." The dragon-tattooed man overheard this and called out, "Hey, big brother, maybe we could be in the movies." This brought another round of laughter, but this time it was hopeful rather than threatening. The other gang members started sharing their own dreams, dreams they had buried under years of street-tough attitudes. "Tomorrow," Chan said, picking up his long-forgotten noodle container, "come to the studio. All of you will have a proper conversation about opportunities." He turned to Wang. "Your neighborhood doesn't have to change for the worse because of the film industry. It can change for the better." Wang extended his hand, no longer adorned with brass knuckles but offered in genuine respect. "We'll be there," he said as Chan shook it, "and, sorry about earlier, we misjudged you." The other gang members nodded in agreement, some looking slightly embarrassed about their earlier behavior. As Chan prepared to leave, one of the younger gang members called out, "Can you teach us more moves tomorrow?" Others joined in, their enthusiasm making them sound more like excited students than the threatening gang they had been just an hour ago. Chan turned back with a smile. "Tomorrow," he promised. "But first, go home and dry off. And maybe leave the weapons behind next time." This brought one final round of laughter from the group. As he walked away, Chan could hear Wang organizing his men, telling them to be at the studio early tomorrow, clean and presentable. What had started as a potentially deadly confrontation had transformed into something nobody could have predicted, the beginning of new opportunities and changed lives. The next morning dawned bright and clear over Hong Kong's bustling streets. Word of the previous night's events had already spread through the neighborhood like wildfire. Mr. Liu, the noodle vendor who had witnessed the beginning of the confrontatio aversion, the story grew slightly more elaborate. By mid-morning, half the neighborhood was talking about how Jackie Chan had transformed a gang of thugs into martial arts students in a single rainy night. At the Golden Harvest Studios, the security guard did a double take when Wang and his men appeared at the gate. They looked different in daylight, dressed in their cleanest clothes, hair combed, all traces of their usual threatening demeanor gone. Even the dragon tattoo seemed less menacing in the morning sun. "We're here to see Jackie Chan," Wang announced, trying to sound professional despite his nervousness. The guard, who had been warned to expect them, nodded and made a call. Within minutes, Chan appeared, looking fresh despite the previous night's excitement. The studio executives were initially skeptical when Chan explained his idea of hiring the former gang members. They sat in their plush office, eyeing the group suspiciously as Chan made his case. "These men know the streets," he argued. "They understand real movement, real fighting. With training, they could be valuable assets." To everyone's surprise, Wang stepped forward and spoke eloquently about his men's potential. He talked about their loyalty, their physical abilities, and their desire to change. The dragon-tattooed man, whose name was actually Alan, demonstrated some of the moves Chan had taught them the night before, showing how quickly they could learn. The studio's stunt coordinator was the first to see the potential. He put the men through some basic tests, running, jumping, falling. Their street experience had given them natural abilities that many trained performers lacked. By lunchtime, 3 of them had been offered jobs as stunt trainees. Wang proved to have an unexpected talent for logistics and security planning. His intimate knowledge of the neighborhood's dynamics made him invaluable for location scouting and crowd control. The studio's head of security, initially the most skeptical, ended up offering him a position as a security consultant. The transformation wasn't just professional, it was personal. The men who had been terrorizing the neighborhood now became its protectors. When other gangs tried to cause trouble during film shoots, Wang's team handled the situation diplomatically, without violence. Their reputation changed from feared thugs to respected community members. Local shop owners, who had once hurriedly closed their shutters when the gang passed by, now greeted them warmly. Mr. Liu offered them free noodles during their breaks, proud to tell his customers that he had witnessed the night that changed everything. Even the police noticed the difference, as reports of street crime in the area dropped significantly. Chan kept his promise to teach them martial arts. 3 times a week, before the studio opened for regular business, he would train with his former attackers. Their dedication surprised even him. They arrived early, practiced hard, and showed genuine interest in the philosophy behind the movements. The dragon-tattooed Alan turned out to be particularly gifted. Within months, he was doing basic stunt work in Chan's films. His first on-screen appearance, a carefully choreographed fall down a flight of stairs, made his mother proud enough to frame the film poster in her small apartment. Wong's transformation was perhaps the most remarkable. The former gang leader became known as a fair and honest businessman. He used his connections to help other young people find legitimate work in the film industry, breaking the cycle of street violence that had plagued the neighborhood for years. One evening, about 6 months after the incident, Chan passed by the alley where it had all happened. The place had changed, the walls were clean, the garbage was gone, and a small martial arts school had opened nearby. Through its windows, he could see Wong's youngest brother teaching children basic moves, their laughter echoing into the street. Mr. Liu, still at his noodle cart, waved Chan over. "Your noodles are on the house," he said with a knowing smile. "After all, your last bowl here got cold during all the excitement." They both looked down the alley, remembering that rainy night that had changed so many lives. The story became more than just neighborhood gossip. It became a testament to the power of giving people a second chance. What could have ended in tragedy instead became a beginning, proving that sometimes the most meaningful victories are won without throwing a single punch. 10 years after that fateful night in the alley, the story had become a legend in Hong Kong's film industry. Film crews would often point out the spot to newcomers, telling them about the night Jackie Chan turned a gang of street fighters into respected film professionals. The tale was shared in tea houses, on movie sets, and in martial arts schools across the city. Wong's transformation became an inspiration for others. His security company now provided services to most of the major film studios in Hong Kong. He employed dozens of former gang members, giving them the same chance he had received. The dragon-tattooed Alan had become one of Hong Kong's most respected stunt coordinators, known for his innovative safety protocols and dedication to teaching young performers. The old Red Dragon Bar, where the gang had once plotted their attack, was now a popular gathering spot for film crews and stunt performers. Photos on its walls told the story of its transformation, from gang hangout to industry landmark. The current owner, Wong's cousin, had turned it into a place where veteran film workers shared stories with newcomers, passing down the lessons learned that rainy night. Mr. Liu's son now ran the noodle cart, but the old vendor still came by occasionally to tell his version of the story. "I saw it all begin," he would say proudly to anyone who would listen, "right here, on this very spot." Though his version had grown more dramatic over the years, the core message remained the same. Sometimes the greatest strength lies in choosing not to fight. The neighborhood itself had flourished. The film industry's presence had brought legitimate businesses and opportunities. The streets that were once dangerous after dark now buzzed with life well into the night. Street vendors served food to film crews, local kids trained in martial arts schools, and former gang territories had transformed into thriving community spaces. Chan himself never forgot that night. In interviews, when asked about his proudest achievements, he would often mention not his blockbuster films or death-defying stunts, but the night he helped change the lives of 6 men who had come to attack him. Real martial arts, he would explain, is not about fighting. It's about transforming negative energy into positive change. The martial arts school that had opened in the alley became one of the most respected in Hong Kong. Its philosophy, inspired by that night, focused not just on physical techniques but on personal transformation. Above its entrance, a sign read, "Victory without violence," words that Chan had lived by that rainy evening. Wong's security team became known as the Alley Brothers, a name that took on a meaning very different from their gang days. They were recognized for their ability to handle difficult situations without violence, often diffusing tensions with the same diplomatic skills Chan had shown them. Their reputation grew so strong that other studios began requesting their services specifically. The impact spread beyond Hong Kong's borders. As Chan's international fame grew, the story traveled with him. Film students from around the world would visit the alley, hoping to absorb some of its legendary wisdom. Some even sought out Wong and his team, learning not just about security and stunts, but about the power of second chances. Allen started a program for at-risk youth, teaching them martial arts and stunt work while providing opportunities in the film industry. Everyone deserves the chance we got, he would tell the students, the dragon tattoo on his neck now partially covered by a newer design, a phoenix rising from flames, symbolizing transformation. On rainy nights, especially ones like that fateful evening, old-timers in the neighborhood would gather at the Red Dragon Bar. They'd share memories of how one man's choice to respond to violence with wisdom had changed not just 6 lives, but an entire community. The story became more than just a tale of martial arts. It became a lesson about the ripple effects of compassion and the power of believing in people's potential to change. Years later, when young filmmakers asked Chan about his greatest fight scene, he would smile and point them toward that ordinary alley. The greatest fights, he would say, are the ones you win without fighting. The legacy of that night lived on not in broken bones or violent victories, but in transformed lives and a community forever changed by one man's choice to see the potential for good in those who came to do him harm. The story became part of Hong Kong cinema's folklore, proof that sometimes the most powerful scenes aren't captured on film at all. They play out in real life, where real heroes are made not by their ability to fight, but by their wisdom to know when not to fight at all.